Hello, welcome to an unexpected video I didn't think I was gonna make, but well, my video where Iron Man and his friends play Werewolf the Apocalypse session turns out it's taking more time than I thought it was gonna take, as I have to build characters and come up with all the rules and have the scene with the dice and such. But it's okay; it's all coming together. There's no it's nothing I can't do. It's just taking more time than I expected. And I also just kind of want to get this video out here because I like to have videos semi-regularly, and also because I just kind of want to do this video. But this is related to the Werewolf the Apocalypse 20th edition that the characters are going to be playing, so this will be somewhat relevant in case you happen to be the type who are interested in watching this glorious upload. But we're here to talk about the settings. So there are not a lot of, but there are a few videos on YouTube about Werewolf the Apocalypse. I may occasionally say Werewolf the Apocalypse 20th edition, but that really doesn't matter as the lore hasn't really changed that much. It's more occasional theming and some cleanup of the rules. But that's not important. What is important is that in the video is that the setting of World of Darkness is kind of interesting. Now, I'm talking about Werewolf the Apocalypse here specifically. Now, all the settings do kind of exist in the same universe, and they do reference each other, and sometimes certain details cross over, like you have the Umbra, which is kind of a thing in Changeling, but it's really a thing in Mage and Werewolf, to the point that books specifically relating to the Umbra from both Werewolf and the Mage are cross-compatible, and even the books themselves, like the one I really want to get, the like the I forget its name, but like the Mage book about like the deep umbra and space and such, is actually referenced in the book that it can and should be used in a werewolf story. But that's not important. But what is important is I'm here to talk about the specific setting of just werewolf. Now, I'm talking about the theme of it. The setting is kind of there, but the thing about World of Darkness is that in general, at least between the individual lines, when other lines starts crossing over, it becomes more of its own thing. But the idea is that the World of Darkness is set in our world, but just a darker version of it. The richer are richer, the poor are poor. Which, by the way, how is the richer being richer makes it worse? Like, the poor and poor I get, but yet in a world, but if the richer are richer and the other classes of people, or not classes, but just economic groups of people, like middle and lower classes, were the same, then technically it would be a better world, or at least just neutral. But that's not important. You know what I mean? Everything's a little darker. Politics are more corrupt. That is objectively bad. You know, they have all these things, and how bad it is has shifted greatly, but, or at least inconsistent. But, we're going to talk about the setting of World of Darkness, and how you can theme it, in my personal opinion. This comes down to a lot, and I don't think I'd run a lot of Chronicles like this, or with some of these settings, but I want to put it out there because these are most of them are very heavily tied into the ones I'm going to do here, about the Wild, the Weaver, and the Worm, which are the triad in Werewolf the Apocalypse / the spiritual religion thing. That's true, even though we all know, but yeah, looking into the lore will easily tell you that God also exists and heaven's real, because Vampire Hunter and Changeling, no, not Vampire Hunter and Demon, all confirm this multiple times. So it's not the creation story gets really weird when you start trying to figure out how that all works. I could probably make an entire video of how to fix some of the continuity errors when you start stitching the different lines together, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. What we're here to talk about today is how to set it up. There are a few categories. One, I'm going to consider the normal categories, or the normal ways you can theme the world of your chronicle. Then we have the one of the triad rules, the two triads of the rule, the two members of the triad rule, but they are at war, or two members of the triad rule, but they're kind of together in a way. I'm not changing more hard lore. I'm not changing hard lore stuff, like I'm not changing the history of the Black Furies, or how the mechanics of changing or kinfolk work, and I'm not changing the fact that Red Talons are virgins and Glassharkers are the Chads of the werewolf world. Personal bias, maybe, but there is some evidence to this. But that's not important. I'm not changing hard lore. I'm not changing stuff like that. What I am changing is stuff like how the world can be themed, which sometimes plays in, but really doesn't. So, don't worry, I'm not changing the tribes or the lore, the mechanics in any way in this video. I'm just changing how you can theme your world. So, let's get started with this. Now, let's start with the World of Darkness thing. This is probably generic template you could use. I don't want to say that because there's also some pretty contenders for that, but the idea is that if you play with the World of Darkness theming, it's a darker version of our world, like I said earlier. It's a darker version. Now, how dark is extremely varied, and often depends of what point in a book or line or setting you happen to be reading at that moment, as it shifts amazingly. It just shifts a lot. Sometimes it's so bad that people die of starvation in the streets in the most well-developed countries like America, even though that's almost unheard of today. You mean, but well, nowadays we have to deal with other things, but that's not the point. And then other times it's just, oh yeah, like the world is pretty much the same. It's just they have these darker elements in the background, aka the supernaturals. And they have these all different things in between. It's kind of weird. But as a general rule, the idea is that everything is just a little bit worse. How much you define as a little bit is a little up for grabs, but it's just a little bit worse. It's just not as good as our world, objectively. And this isn't like specific to one place, it's an overall thing. Now, this does get confusing in Werewolf because you have the Triad, which has the whole, which also ties into the morality of the game and how you do things like that. But in general, it's a pretty simple thing to go with. The book kind of uses by default, and it just kind of comes into what you want. It can heavily change by the moment, but just because the world is darker doesn't mean it doesn't have happy moments. That's not important. It's not like it doesn't happen. Now, whether those happy moments are I wouldn't say the good, happy moments are dulled. I just say they might come less frequently, but in a way they might stand out more in the drabness. After all, one little bit of white looks a lot more prominent in a sea of black than a sea of gray. But that's just how it rolls. The next, and also kind of generic template you could use is what I would consider the normal theming. The normal theming is essentially our world. It isn't really... I mean, obviously the werewolves exist and all the supernatural things that come with it, but fundamentally everything as far as theming and lightness and darkness is our world. Now, this is where your own personal subjective opinion of how the world is can easily come in, but in general, the world is just our world. The morality isn't much different, the world isn't any lighter or darker than normal, it's just our world. Not factoring the werewolves, of course, they're kind of their own thing. But, although this does kind of play into something I want to specify about the Triad in Werewolf the Apocalypse, the Wild, the Weaver, and the Worm, is how they kind of work. Now, in the World of Darkness setting, the general consensus, I would say, is that the Worm is the most powerful and has the most influence, then followed up by the Weaver, and then the Wild. But the Worm and Weaver have a lot more control, at least theming-wise, in the World of Darkness. So they would be like, they're not like the At War or Together that I'm going to talk about later, but they are the most powerful. However, in the normal world, I don't know if I would call... If you're trying to classify our world, I don't know if you could really describe our world as belonging to either of the three or anything like that. If I had to guess, I would say it might be slightly tilted in the direction of the Weaver. Maybe slightly. Although with recent events, as the Worm is known for disease, it might be leaning more that way. Our world is a pretty neutral place as far as that would go. Now, okay, like, I know people say, but the wilderness is being destroyed. Maybe in some places, but trust me, if you live where I live in West Virginia, and I live not that far out from the city. Well, city, there's no, like, this capital, it's sometimes debated if it's called a city, but under technical terms by the U.S. government, but that's not important. I live just outside of Simulated Limits. I've been to the city multiple times, and I'm recording this right now in the woods, actually, and I actually had to stall on recording this video a few minutes because some deer decided that they wanted to interrupt my video. If I interrupt them and prevent me from doing it, because they wanted to eat the grass there at that particular moment and decided to look aggressive towards me. I did the smart thing and backed off. So, in our world, I can tell you 100%, nature still has influence. Don't diss that very much. But we should probably get on to things that aren't just our world. Now, next category I'm going to do is called the one faction rules, essentially, where the idea is that one of the Triad rules the world almost completely. Now, how does it can vary of overall, it can vary to, oh yeah, most of the world belongs to these guys, but you can still find, like, a patch of forest or something to, I don't know, whatever you want to do in there, to everything is this, and everything is that, and it sucks. Probably. So we're going to start with the Worm. Now, the Worm is the Corruptor. The Corruptor, it used to be the Spirits of Battle, it corrupts, it decays, it destroys, it's entropy, not very nice things. So in a world where it is supremely dominant, I know some people might say the world of darkness could qualify, and some very nihilistic people could say our world qualifies, but regardless of your opinions, I'm talking to the max. Like, not even cities would be around, they'd be falling apart, rotting, decay, the forests themselves would be decaying, everything would be decaying and dying, and life would be a commodity at best. It's definitely a very dark world to set your story in, and realistically, if I was ever going to use this setting, the idea of a world with a worm rules supreme, I'd set it up as either the apocalypse is just about coming, it's just about here, baby. You got like a few weeks. Grab your guns, grab your ammo, get some friends, and let's go to war. That would be either that, or there'd be some place that you could escape to as the mission of the Chronicle that would keep you safe, or you're trying to rescue people to there, like the Umbra, or just a nice little place where it's not corrupted, whether by the Weaver or the Wild or anything, really. Just some place like that. That's the only times I really use this, because it really is the if we fail, this will happen situation. It's not really much in the way of what you can... It's kind of limited, but you can totally do it. The next one rule scenario is the Weaver rules, and this one is a little bit more tricky as it's the spirit of technology, control, and order. And it also gives purpose occasionally. So, a world where it rules supreme would probably be mostly cities, although you could totally see a very organized forest, like all the trees are spaced 2 feet apart or something. And they all have this many branches, that many leaves, and stuff like that. Everything's on time, everything's orderly. Free will might not be a concept, depending on how much influence it has over the individual people who live there. It would be stuff like that. You would see a lot of technological advancement, or advancement might be limited because you might not be advancing, but you see a lot of advanced technology, let's go with that, in a world where the Weaver rules supreme. There could be an interesting time to set it, but it kind of falls in the same category of, this is the end game, this is what we're trying to avoid kind of situation. The Glasswalkers, I think it gets an influence, might make it pretty nice, or at least more tolerable. It kind of does limit it as it's kind of, I imagine it would be kind of difficult to do, but you could totally run it, and I probably do a worm one bet before I do a Weaver takeover, because the Weaver just doesn't really have the same appeal as everything's dying, just in my opinion. It works great in small doses, but it doesn't really work in my personal opinion. The next one, the last one, where the one rules supreme, is the Wild. What if the Wild's Gaia nature rules supreme? Now, this is where it gets tricky, as you wouldn't see as many cities, I don't think, but you'd also see them kind of decaying but be taken over. It'd be wild, chaotic, everything would be a bit unstable. By unstable, I mean horribly unstable. But, you would see stuff like that. You would have all these things, and you would have, like, there'd be wilderness everywhere. Forests, deserts, jungles. It would be a mess. You might think, that sounds like not so bad place if you read a lot of Werewolf or don't think too much, but they have to remember there are people living here, and the wild is not necessarily friendly. It's actually could be quite dangerous if left unchecked. It just happens not to be at this particular point in the Werewolf the Apocalypse storyline. But if it was, you would have a lot of chaotic things, people mutating all the time, Umbra bleeding in every 5 minutes. It would be a lot going on, and it would be chaotic. The worlds might find more fun unless you're a Glasswalker, in which case you probably want to get this fixed as soon as possible. It could also be used as an endgame scenario, though werewolves might, depending on your some werewolves, like the Red Talons, might consider this more as their victory condition. But you could totally have that. You know, what if they win, and then werewolves try to split off, trying to think of how they should reorganize the world. Like, if they win the apocalypse, Gaia takes over the Earth, and now they're arguing about what they want to do. That can be a thing. Now, we're going to do the 2 together idea. What if 2 of the Triad rule together? Where they might not be working together, but they're not actively fighting each other more than they normally would in a neutral setting. This one, where the Worm and the Weaver take over, is basically World of Darkness, max times 10, Electric Boogaloo now in stores, everything's gonna suck, everything sucks, it's terrible, your life sucks, and you probably want to burn it as quickly as possible. In this kind of thing, wild places would likely be refuges of sanity, ironically, and you have stuff like that. You would have this going on. It would be like that. It would definitely be done like that. It would basically just be it'd be chaos. You would not, it would be basically just the world darkness, how the whales view it, max. There isn't much else to justify here. The Weaver and the Wild working together, or at least, no, being together, would actually be kind of interesting, as you would have stuff like cities, but then you have a bunch of forests running around, and then you have like the cities acting like forests, and the forests acting like cities. It would kind of actually be pretty interesting. And this is like, I'd almost say it would be the Black August victory condition. This would be like what they would want. And this, now, I would hesitate to call it utopia or even good, but it could be really nice depending on how you wrote it, because they both have good elements to them. So, so you can either run this as a good thing, or you could run it as, evil technology kind of thing, aka Avatar, aka Burn, because I really have a problem with stories like that all the time, but that's not important. But, or you could run it as, like, once again, something like a Glass August victory condition kind of thing. If they, like a world of mixing like that. The last one they're working together is the Wild and the Worm. I would say this world, the Wild and the Worm working together, or at least being together, without the Weaver's influence, would probably look something like a I don't want to say post-apocalypse, but something like the cities and society are now decaying and rotting, and everything's taking over. It's chaos, it's madness, it's insanity, things like chaos and 40K maybe, mixed with a little bit of like not elves, but like forest and nature stuff. It would be chaos if you're a human. It would not be a fun time. It would be a mess, just a pure, unadulterated mess. Werewolves would have issue both with and without it. There's a lot you could do with it. It's definitely more chaos kind of. I could totally imagine something like a Werewolf Chronicles starting off with the premise that someone very briefly was able to knock out the Weaver just for a microsecond, so small that not even the Weaver noticed that it was incapacitated for a moment in time, very briefly, and then it came back. But in that moment, it gave the Wild and the Weaver, which have been always working, always fighting, time to take over. And now the cities are falling apart, society is collapsing, knowledge is being lost. It would be a mix of post-apocalyptic and crazy, and you could totally do that. It would totally be a thing. The two at war is kind of interesting. If the Weaver and now after that, we have the two at war, where two of the Triad are basically at war with each other. Now they're all kind of at war, but this is like advanced war or something, or specifically these two. A world where that's like that. The Weaver and the Worm at war would be pretty much, you have the orderly civilizations, and then you have the chaos pits of madness fighting each other, and I guess the Weaver would probably be the good guys in this situation. The Whales would probably be both just insane, fighting over different reasons to the Glasswalkers, but you could totally have stuff like that. That's pretty simple, but you could totally do that as you have like cities decaying and cities coming out of the mark, and then this repeats over and over as the infinite battleground continues. If the Weaver and the Wild were at war with each other, it'd basically be cities and tech. As you have like the city, civilization, society versus nature and stuff like that. They kind of want to do this once again. It's not like quite to the max. It's just kind of more purified like that in a way. You have these two fighting for like control of the earth. Like the cities would try to claim the forest, and the forest would claim some of the cities, and this would go on for a while. And this is how that would work. If the Wild and the Worm went to they would do dominant forces, it would probably look something like you would have a world almost completely covered by nature and forest and all that jazz, but then these parts would just start rotting and decaying and falling into insanity and madness, and the whales would be trying to fix it and keep the worm as much contained as possible. Well, that's what I think it would look like. And last two are pretty simple. The three at war are basically where all three were super powerful, and now they were all fighting each other, which would probably look something like infinite battlegrounds. We have seas and forests and corrupted pits constantly fighting, and madness and insanity, and generally just everything happening, and there'd be a lot of fighting, and the borders would constantly be shifting like crazy. It would definitely be chaos, but it could totally be done. And them working together, well, not working together, but just existing together without openly fighting each other all the time in massive World War III style, would probably just be, you have like city areas, corrupted areas, and wild areas. And that's how it would probably work, and all the sub-variants and shenanigans like that would probably be how that would go down. But yeah, that's what I would do. Those are my general ideas for the theming of Werewolf the Apocalypse, the overall world. As far as that goes, it'd probably be pretty, like, those are just some rough ideas I have and I think are interesting. So, sue me if you want, but that's what I would do, personally. But yeah, hope you enjoyed this video. I'll try to get out my Werewolf the Iron Man plays Werewolf the Apocalypse video as soon as I can. Though I might make a Spirit Science video before that if I can find the time to record that one, because Spirit Science, not my mortal nemesis, but it's there. It's somewhere there. It's somewhere on my enemy list. But I hope you enjoyed this video and see you later.